cautious, believe me. Never had a lot of shit come easy. Had to work hard, struggle just to be me. Had to and what was left over I put towards my dreaming. But the only thing in life that has meaning are the things you gotta work for, believe me. Take into your hands a plan, your own hands can land your own brand. And damn, I feel like no one takes accountability. They want the credibility, convincingly unwilling to put in the hours it takes to get some power. Don't be f***ing sour, take a cold shower. Scream until you're louder, work until you're prouder. And f*** all the doubters, they're just your downers. I swear to God they all let me down. I always fought.
I can tell you that 7 years after Freddie Gray, that was 2015, spring, April, May. This is 2022. Communities like Sandtown, all we saw then and now in terms of investment was a renovated Western District Police Station and a new funeral home. That's what West Baltimore got. A new police station and a new funeral home. What kind of optics are they? Was Freddie Gray any different than 1968 Baltimore riots? Dr. King's passing, killing, murder? This is the same?
No, it wasn't. I mean, I think, well, first of all, people who are being violent and burning, that's, all that's the same. But the point is what was the cause and what were they attempting to register?
I always fought just to wear the crown. I'm off at these fucking clowns.
I love you.
They deserve an ounce. It's got next.
And on before.
It's only worth it if you work for it. I won't stop till they hear me now. I won't stop till I wear the crown. I swear to God they all let me down. I always fought just to wear the crown. I'm off at these fucking clowns.
First name's Donnie, last name's Glover, in it to win it for the long haul, baby. What a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Glad to be here, glad to be in the land of the living. We're going to get straight to the jugular and bring up my colleague and compadre, the one and only, John Rydell. You got to unmute yourself there, John. You're muted. Hit that mute. You got to hit the mute button. You're muted. This technology has us all learning some new stuff. Take your time. Just hit the microphone. Give them a chance to get it together there. So my name's Donnie Glover. We've been doing this broadcast since December of 2020. And I tell you, it's been a learning experience, the whole nine. There he goes. There it is.
Okay, got it now. You'd figure I had to figure this out by now.
Well, you're a pro at this juncture.
No.
Good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning. How you doing? I love that open. That open is, and you shot most of that, right?
Yes, sir. You taught me well.
Yeah, I don't shoot video, but yeah, no, that's impressive. Yeah.
What have you been up to?
Not covering politics too much. I'm just kind of sitting back and watching everything. And we've got the, of course, the big, what do you call a runoff election in Georgia next Tuesday. That's the Raphael Warnock, the incumbent, and Herschel Walker.
Do you get the impression that African Americans are excited about Herschel Walker?
I mean, it all comes down to politics, doesn't it? I mean, Herschel Walker.
I'm going to help you out. No.
Well, remember what former President Obama said when he was campaigning for Warnock? And he said, Obama's really, as an ex-president, he's unfiltered. And he told the crowd, he said, hey, Herschel Walker, what a great, legendary football player. Can we all agree? And they're like, yeah. And then he said, but would you want him to be the pilot of the plane that you're about to get on? They're like, Well, wait a minute. No, why would you know? And so how do you, just because you're a great athlete, does that make you a good U.S. senator? It's happened a few times, but it's amazing. Everybody, all the Republicans, Senator Lindsey Graham and others, they're all jumping on the bandwagon for Herschel Walker because he's got an R after his name. So we'll see. I don't know.
Well, John, that was very polite. But I'm going to give you the perspective from the people I've talked to. They said that Herschel Walker is the type of African American that Harriet Tubman would have left.
Mm-hmm. Did you see the little clip from the sermon from Pastor Jamal Bryant that was on Twitter?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
That was an uneven fight. I like Westerns. And it's always about who's the quickest draw. That wasn't even a competition.
Would you call that a smackdown? Maybe that was
Smackdown, beat down.
Yeah.
Embarrassing. Jamal mopped the floor with him.
Mm. Yeah, I mean,
but I gotta bring this up. In certain circles, does Jamal have credibility?
Well,
but on this case,
right.
I mean, this was like T-ball. For Jamal not to hit this one, it's like, come on.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, he certainly had his issues, but in this case, he was focused on that particular race and just, I guess, exposing Herschel Walker for what, he is.
He's not a senator.
Yeah.
He's not a U.S. senator. You and I have talked about many things over the years, and I think we agree that when you get into a political campaign, black, white, Jewish, Gentile, we want capable, qualified people to run the municipality in question, the city, the state, the country. You want serious candidates who love people.
Right.
I think that's where Donald Trump has lost people because it just seems to be mean.
Well, look at the midterm results. It was I guess a rebuke in many ways to the Trump endorsed candidates that weren't really, they probably didn't belong there. I mean, Dr. Oz is a TV personality. Oh no, he's going to be a good U.S. senator. Well, why? Because Trump endorsed him. And then, so that doesn't look good for him. And then, of course, you probably talked about it already. The infamous dinner down in Mar-a-Lago with Trump inviting Kanye West and a guest that he didn't know about. He doesn't, he's never heard of this guy, Nick Fuentes. Tony, you've been to the White House, multiple times, many times? You don't just show you don't just show up at the White House. Hey, I'm here to. They need to know who you are. When we would cover the president, if he came to Baltimore or whatever, they need your full name. They need your date of birth. They need where you were born, place of birth. They used to require your social security number. I don't know if they do that anymore. They just need to know who you are, and somebody checks to see if you have some kind of record.
You're damn right. I saw somebody get locked up going in the White House. They were attempting to go in. They had a warrant in Atlanta, and the security guard, who I later found out, pardon my language, the Secret Service officer, who I later found out was from Towson. I'll never forget how it went down. We were standing in line to go in the front door, and he said, "Sir, would you come here, please?" I said, "Who, me?" He's like, "No, the one behind you." And I said, "He's talking to you." And next thing I know, the guy went to the front and said, "Sir, put your hands behind your back." It was the most polite arrest I've ever seen in my life. but it also put me on point that you can get locked up. You come all the way down the road, 45 minutes from Baltimore, navigating traffic, getting in your parking and all of that. And you get to the front gate and somebody says, "Sir, put your hands behind your back." I was traumatized.
But they vetted everybody, and that's how they tracked this guy down. When I covered the Naval Academy graduations many years, he had presidents, vice presidents. It was almost easier if you didn't have the president, because you could, you go through the metal detector and that's it. If the president is there, okay, you got to submit, your name, where you, all that kind of stuff. There was a guy I worked with, this is years ago in radio. He goes in there, this is according to him. They see his name or whatever, and he must have been arrested for second-degree assault. It wasn't anything real major. Well, that could be anything. That could be a dispute between a neighbor, barroom brawl, whatever. According to this guy, he's a Secret Service guy, says, okay, we know who you are. We know what you did. So we're going to be watching you. I mean, there's like 40,000 people there. And he's, I guess, a reporter for a radio station. But they knew who he was and what he did. So the idea that somebody just, Trump knows who Kanye West is because Kanye West went to the White House. Oh, I'm going to bring a date or a guest. What? No, they know exactly who these people are, and they probably had the date of birth. And I don't know whether this guy has a criminal record, but we know, what his track record is. So and now Republicans were very reluctant to come out and criticize Trump. So a week later, now they're kind of coming out and saying, yeah, that probably wasn't a good thing because they were under pressure to do so. I mean, a guy that wants to run for president again is sitting down to dinner at his own house, and that's what it is. It's a mansion or whatever, with, people that are either very racist or very anti-Semitic. The optics, it's just not good.
I wanted to ask you about Brittany Griner. Have you been following the case of the WNBA basketball player who's found herself in very hot waters in Russia? I hear they did not send her to a resort type prison. They sent her to a hardcore type prison. Any thoughts on that situation?
Right. Well, it's 110% political. Everybody knows it. If she had a vaping cartridge, imagine if you're detained at BWI for something like that. Are you going to get a citation or what? I don't even know what would happen to you if they discovered whatever she had on me. I don't even know what it is. No, they know who she was. They knew she was a basketball player. She was a noted, figure. And of course she's a political pawn. And what makes things more complex is this, the war in Ukraine and how the U.S. was responding. So Putin's just sitting back and just saying, oh, let's just let her sit for a while. And now we've got a bargaining chip. And I'm sure that the Biden administration behind the scenes are trying to maybe work out a swap of somebody that's being held here or something like that. But it's not that easy when you've got that added dimension of the war in Ukraine. And so, Putin knows and it's sad. It's sad for this, this person, this WNBA star player or whatever, or whoever she is, to be detained indefinitely for political reasons. That's what it is. What would you even be arrested at BWI?
Yes.
If that happened I guess you would be.
Well,
but it would be such a minor charge. I don't even know.
I don't play in other people's country.
Yeah.
I remember going to Jamaica, and a young lady asked me if I wanted some marijuana.
Yep.
Lady, I think you need to get on that plane and get yourself back to the States. But that was, I couldn't imagine. She's going to stuff it in her body.
She's an American?
Yes. And I said, you will be here in Jamaica by yourself.
Mm.
No, thank you. Let me be clear. No, thank you.
Well, that can happen in a lot of these countries, Bahamas and places like that. It might have. I mean, I was in the Bahamas a couple of times, but people come, oh, reefer or whatever. It's like, oh, right, okay, you get arrested in the Bahamas or wherever. Whatever happened to John Rydell? I don't know. Or Mexico. Yeah. But yes, it's sad. It's sad. I mean, I would guess that at some point that there will be a swap or a deal worked out. But Putin isn't. It's all in his court, so he's just sitting back and it's like, I've got the upper hand in this, and she's the one that's paying the price.
Tell me about this governor of Florida. Was it Rick DeSantis?
Ron DeSantis, yeah.
Ron DeSantis. Do you think this guy will run for president?
Sure, of course he will, and it's him against Donald Trump. And somebody asked President Biden about that, and Biden just kind of chuckled. He didn't really give a comment. He says, "Well, this will be interesting to see." And you knew what he meant, meaning I'm just going to sit back and let the two kind of go each other. And Trump already has a nickname for Ron DeSantis. What do you call him? Ron DeSanctimonious or something like that. So already, when Trump comes up with a nickname for you, then you know that he's worried about you. And I guess Governor Hogan, other than being called a rhino by Trump, I don't know if Hogan has gotten a nickname from Trump. I don't think Trump's overly worried about Hogan. I think he's worried about Ron DeSantis because DeSantis won that re-election battle very handily, which is no surprise in Florida. It's a Republican state. The majority of the members of the legislature there are Republican. Most of the office holders are Republican. So it's that, that's not a surprise. But now you're going to, as a registered Republican, now you got a real quandary. Do you go with the old guy and the MAGA and all that kind of stuff, or did you look ahead to somebody else? So, Ron, of course he's going to run. And when during that debate with his opponent, the opponent asked him, "So, Governor, are you going to serve all 4 years if you're reelected?" DeSantis, he couldn't even answer. He was like stunned that he was asked the question. It was a legitimate question. So that told you right there that yeah, he's going to run. So we'll see.
So Kelly Schultz, Larry Hogan's candidate, was smashed by Donald Trump's candidate.
Yes.
Here in the state of Maryland, does that make Larry Hogan look weak?
I think so. That was his handpicked candidate. Kelly Schultz was a former state delegate from Frederick County, not really, all that well known. I covered her in the General Assembly, interviewed her a couple of times, and then Hogan appointed her as labor secretary, I think for the first term, and then the second term was appointed as her commerce secretary. So, she had some stature in his administration. Again, not a household name, but it had to be an embarrassment for Governor Hogan to have her lose by that much. And there's some people, probably some Republicans, saying, why wasn't he should have been out on the campaign trail more and more almost every day, knowing, hey, if she wins, I look good because that's my handpicked candidate. This other guy, who was just an unknown, Dan Cox, was this obscure delegate in Frederick County. I'd never even heard of him. And I covered the General Assembly. I mean, there's 188 legislators, so sometimes you don't know all of them. It's like, well, who is this guy? And then once he jumped on the Trump bandwagon, and then, as you know, he organized a busload of people to go down to the Capitol on January 6th to attend the Stop the Steal rally, at the Ellipse and south of the White House. There's no evidence that he went to the Capitol or went inside the Capitol, but, he was on Twitter that afternoon. And then a short time after Trump issued that infamous tweet about he's very disappointed that Pence didn't do what he should have done, meaning to take action to overturn the Electoral College vote. And then Dan Cox tweets out, Pence is a traitor. So you're running for governor and you're accusing the vice president of the United States in your own party, a Republican, of being a traitor because he did the right thing. I mean, Pence knew, whatever you think of Mike Pence, and he was a very, very loyal vice president to Trump. Pence was advised that you can't, to do that, you're violating the Constitution. So at some point, he knew he had to make the decision that he did, basically to, it's a ceremonial type of position that he is in to, I guess, certify the Electoral College.
Pence came from Indiana.
Yes.
So there's a former lieutenant colonel here in Baltimore, Rick Haight. He went out to Indianapolis to become the police commissioner. And as this thing was unfolding, Trump's initial victory as president, I remember Rick Haight telling me about his experience with Pence. And while Rick Haight, black cop, Democrat, typically, presumably, he worked for Mike Pence, but he had really nice things to say about him. So, when I found out that Pence was from Indiana, I had to check with Commissioner Rick Haight just to get his take on it. And again, it was because the person is a Republican or this or that, still doesn't say what kind of person they are. And Rick Haight said that Pence was a decent person. So now here we are in the state of Maryland. Let me ask you, were you surprised at all at the gubernatorial election?
Oh, you mean the amount of the victory with Wes Moore? I mean, I don't think there was any question that Wes Moore was going to win. And I think in the days leading up to the election, and I'm sure that he was advised well, it's like, no, don't take anything for granted. I think they always knew that they would win, but they didn't want to win by a small margin, like 51% to 49%, and then allow someone like a Dan Cox to, kind of get into that Republican playbook and say, no, I think there was in Garrett County, they didn't, there's a box, or, that kind of thing. If it's really close, or to the point where you'd have to have a recount, you'd hate to have that in a gubernatorial election. So I don't know what the numbers were, but it was pretty decisive. But look at all of the people that still voted for Dan Cox, knowing that he probably didn't have any, any road to victory. And that's the interesting thing in the primary. I mean, if you're just put yourself as a registered Republican, if you're a registered Republican, don't you want the next governor to be a Republican? Yeah, of course you do. So to do that, wouldn't you decide that, okay, I guess we got to go with Kelly Schultz because she seems more reasonable. Hogan likes her. Hogan is a very popular governor. To be a very popular governor, you've got to have Democratic support also. So, okay, I guess I'll vote for Kelly Schultz. No, we're going to vote for Dan Cox because he said Mike Pence is a traitor and he's endorsed by Trump. He went down to Mar-a-Lago, but he has no path to. Somebody like Dan Cox is not going to win in the state of Maryland. So that's my personal opinion. Try to be objective. Why don't you vote for somebody in the primary that you think can win in the general election? But it didn't.
Where do you see Larry Hogan going next?
Well, I mean, it all is an indicator that he wants to run for president. But I think,
is he in the equation with Ron DeSantis?
I mean,
Mike Pence?
I don't see. Mike that responded there says DeSantis and Mike Pence would probably be the front runners, and there could be a couple of other people. I don't know. I mean, Governor Hogan is certainly looks like he would be interested in running, and of course Martin O'Malley did. When you're the Maryland governor, you're so close to D.C. You can just get in your SUV and get down to the White House in an hour, and you can be on Meet the Press, Face the Nation, and that's pretty impressive. And then you start to think, well, gosh, I'm this popular because the networks keep calling me, and that allows him to get a little bit of national exposure. But it all comes down to, in my opinion, where do Republicans go in 2024? Are they still kind of holding on to the past with Trump? And every single day that goes by, Trump is doing things that mainstream Republicans are saying, this guy, maybe we supported him in 2016 or 2020, but now he's going to be as old as Biden was when he ran. We got to look to the future. That's, somebody else.
Where have we gone with elections? You've been covering elections a while. Today, you have to have social media. Today, if you don't have a digital footprint, and I haven't gotten the answer, but I look at the Wes Moore campaign, how this candidate comes out of left field with no political office experience and swoops the state from seasoned Democrats.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, he had been laying the groundwork for quite some time, and the book, The Other Wes Moore, that was a bestseller, kind of let people know a little bit about his background, where he came from, where he was going. And yes, he was criticized for perhaps misleading people. Oh, I grew up in Baltimore City. He didn't. His first few years of his life, he lived in Tacoma Park. And, we know the story about his father. And as I mentioned to you previously, I actually had a brief phone conversation with Wes Moore's father, Wes Moore Sr., many, many years ago out of college, because he was a radio newscaster in Washington, D.C. at WMAL, which was a powerhouse news operation in its day. I grew up in the D.C. area.
You knew Wes' dad? I
spoke to his dad on the phone. And, when I graduated from Towson University, whatever it was, Towson State back then. And we were told, if you want to go into a field, you should call somebody up. You should contact somebody that's already working in your field. Ask them how they got there, what advice you can give me. So I'm like, well, I've listened to this guy. He was the evening newscaster. I'll just call him up. So I called him up in the newsroom, and he answers, and had a brief chat with him. I'd totally forgotten about it until I read the book, and I'm like, oh, his father was a newscaster. I'm like, wait a minute. I spoke to him on the phone. And then thanks to you, I had a brief phone conversation with Wes Moore, the candidate, to relay that information about him. But, when you work in an office environment and you get a phone call from somebody you don't know, sometimes most people don't have time to, it's like, okay, voicemail or take a message. They just picked up the phone. It's very nice, brief conversation. He probably told me that, I'm inexperienced and I need to go to some kind of small market in Hagerstown or something, go to small radio station, get a little bit of experience, that kind of thing. But it's in that small world. But no, Wes Moore, I mean, this had been building for several years, and then, getting the backing of Oprah and that kind of thing. So this was a fresh face on the political scene, and some of the other people that were running, Doug Gansler and Rashawn Baker, respected men that had been, prosecutors or county executives, but they had run before. And so I think when they announced, it was like, oh, these guys again. They are upset that they didn't win the last time. And I think that's why they didn't get all that much support. It's not about that they're not qualified, but people, maybe they're just looking for somebody new. And maybe that's what's going to happen in the presidential race. And the big question mark is what Joe Biden is going to do in 2024. And he has to say that he's going to run for re-election right now. But that could change. He could, if he sits down with his family over the holidays and has a frank discussion, maybe they make the decision that, at age 80, he could be a liability to the party. If you're a Democrat, you want a Democrat to win in 2024.
But you don't switch up quarterbacks in the middle of the game.
It's very difficult, very difficult. And it's a little different than LBJ years and years ago. So, we know that how he got to be president. And he won, he was elected only one time in 1964 after the Kennedy assassination. In 1967, he announced that he's going to have a national address to the nation. Well, everyone thought it was going to be about the Vietnam War because we were at the height of the Vietnam War in 1967. So he starts talking, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he says, what, I shall not seek nor accept your nomination for president of the United States. And that would have been for 1968. So that was, oh my gosh, that was a shock to the country. So now all of a sudden you had, an open seat for the presidential race. Nixon won in 1968, as we know. And he beat, I guess it was Hubert Humphrey, who was LBJ's vice president. I'm not a presidential historian. So
neither am I.
Those were different circumstances back then. And I think it was maybe because of the Vietnam War or whatever. And so it can happen. But I mean, if Biden is convinced that him not seeking re-election is best for the party or the country, we'll see. I mean,
I see him running. Male ego is not going to say, hey, I'm too weak to run. It's a part of being a male. It's ego.
Right.
For him to say that, he might as well go ahead and just jump in a grave. He is not going to do that.
You could be right. Yeah.
At this juncture, come on, John, you've seen it. The importance of self-esteem, of self-confidence, and what happens to us or to candidates in an election. You've seen candidates go through meltdowns and, mental illness, mental health. I mean, it's like a baseball player no longer playing baseball, but they missed the game. And so they always looking for ways to get their hand in there. You've seen it. You've seen it.
Like Tom Brady. Yeah. Well, the oldest president, I think, to serve was Ronald Reagan. And when he served 2 terms, he left office at age 77. But as we know, years later, in that second term, and they tried to keep it quiet, he was developing early onset Alzheimer's. And, his wife, Nancy Reagan, would whisper things to him, and he would pretend not to hear or something like, we're doing the best we can. And he would say that. So, Biden is 80 now. So in 2 years, he's 82. If he wins re-election, 84, 86. I mean, we'll see. It's a tough call, but yes, ego, and is it disruptive to the party? I mean, we know very little right now because it's November of 2022. It's a long time, almost 2 years until the election. But I mean, if he decides to get out, it's a question of fundraising. Who the other candidates were going to be. There's probably about 20 Democrats that are kind of waiting on the sideline to see what happens. So
I got to ask you this before I ask you what I really want to ask you, which is about local politics. That when you see an Adrian Jones as Speaker of the House, when you see Governor-elect Westmore, when you see Attorney General Anthony Brown, when you see House Speaker Derek Davis, what are your thoughts on African Americans finally getting into some of these top posts?
Well, you look at the population of Maryland, and it's to me it shouldn't be any surprise. It took a long time, but the 3 biggest roles in Maryland really are the people that are on that Maryland Board of Public Works. So that would be Governor Westmore. It would be the new state controller, Brooke Learman. And then Derek Davis is the state treasurer, and he's not elected by the people. He's essentially elected by the members of the General Assembly, that he's their representative on that board. Of course, Delegate Brooke Learman, who represents Baltimore City, now you've got 2 people that served in the legislature. So that, I guess that helps from that standpoint. but yeah, I mean, for years it was the three old white guys on that board. Now you've got a real diverse board that, and that reflects the state of Maryland. So to me, it's not a real surprise. Well, they will all have their challenges. There's all kinds of, more will be criticized like Hogan, but that's part of being governor. But yeah.
So I want to throw the long ball. Then I'm gonna get to local politics. The long ball, hypothetically, in 8 years, maybe 4, who wants to be governor from the Democratic side? Is it Johnny Olszewski? I mean, Johnny's plans. I remember 4 years ago, 3 years ago, people were looking at Johnny Olszewski and Angela Alsobrooks as presumed front runners in a gubernatorial race.
Right.
Since then, I don't know. Would Olszewski win beyond Baltimore County? Rashawn Baker, I mean, when he ran for governor, some people might not like what I say, but that was a average campaign at best.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like, well, why are you getting in this? I don't know. I like what you said about West. He had planned it. Obama planned it. They put in time. They studied the game. Oh, here's the question. Trump, Hogan, Wes Moore. What do they all have in common?
Oh boy, that's what, is this a joke or what?
They were never in office.
That's correct, right? And people now Hogan was part of the Ehrlich administration as appointment secretary, but that's like Ehrlich appointed him because of his political pedigree. His father was the congressman from Prince George's County. He was on the Watergate committee that criticized Nixon. So I think, and Hogan had run before, but yes, that's correct. No. Hogan's father. Well, let's see. I think didn't Larry Hogan try to run for Congress or something years ago? I should know that, and I don't. But you're right. I think people are, and I think maybe with Peter Franchot, maybe people thought, initially Peter Franchot was the
in 92, Hogan was Republican nominee for Maryland's 5th congressional district, running against Democratic incumbent Steny Hoyer.
Okay.
Hoyer outspent Hogan 6-1. The race was the closest in Hoyer's tenure.
Okay. All right. So that's correct.
Thanks for that edification.
Okay. And I mean, we'll see if Steny Hoyer runs again in 2 years. I mean, at some point, do you just say, okay, I'm in my 80s. I had a great career, and now it's time to turn it over to a younger generation. We'll see what happens there. With regard to the 3 people that you mentioned as possible gubernatorial candidates down the road, I mean, I think all would be serious contenders, but you have to give those 3 credit, though. They could have jumped into the race because a lot of people said, oh, Johnny O, he might run for governor. Calvin Ball of Howard County, the Howard County executive. He won re-election pretty easily over Kittleman, who was the county executive. Angela Alsobrooks, the Prince George's County executive, very popular in the D.C. area. But that's so far down the road. But none of that matters. It matters what Wes Moore is going to do. Wes Moore can't run. He's not going to run for president in 2024. That's not going to happen. If he gets reelected and he's popular and the state of Maryland looks good, then, who knows? Maybe down the road, we'll see what happens in 2028 or something. That's so far down the road. Yes, that is possible as a presidential candidate, but we'll see. We'll see what happens to Biden. And but again, if he is even thinking about retiring, he would have to do that sooner rather than later for the benefit of the party, because you need to give these other people considering a run plenty of time to set up their campaign, to conduct fundraising and things like that.
Baltimore. I remember with this term limit question that came out, question K, on Monroe Street in the 1800 block. If you drive down Monroe Street, 1 block south of North Avenue, you will see red, black, and green signs that say "Vote for Question K." I won't name names, but there are certain spokespeople from the African American community who said yes for term limits. Professor Larry Gibson tried to caution, particularly the Black community, that you may want to look at who's pushing this term limit thing and why. What do you know about that?
It's funny you should mention 1800 block of South Monroe. We would, that's the way we would take to go through West Baltimore to get on 295 or something to go to Annapolis. So yeah, I'm very familiar with every block along there.
Term limits. Who's pushing term limits and why?
Well, you know the answer to that. That was one of my former corporate bosses at Sinclair Broadcast Group, based in Hunt Valley.
Why doesn't he run for governor instead of trying to be the de facto mayor of Baltimore? I mean, he wants to be something, right?
Who's that?
Stephen Smith.
Oh, David Smith, you're talking about. David Smith is the chairman of the board for Sinclair Broadcast Group. That's the parent company of Fox 45, but they also own nearly 200 TV stations around the country. It's WJLA in Washington, Columbus, Ohio, stations all throughout the area. So
do they do the same antics there that they do in Baltimore, like pushing a through garage down our throats?
Well, probably not, because keep in mind, David lives in Baltimore County, so he lives in this area. So that's probably, what's behind it. And his son and nephew are, involved in the Atlas Restaurant Group, that whole thing. But Question K passed, and it wasn't any surprise that it passed. I knew it would pass, because the average person, they don't know who bankrolls a question. If they look on the ballot and they go, yeah, these politicians should be served no more than 2 terms. Well, yeah, public officials, politicians are not the most popular people, that whether it's at the Congress, national level or local or state level or whatever. So, I mean, I knew it was going to pass. So now but it won't take effect until what, 2024? Is that correct?
The council time to remove it.
I don't know how that would be done. I know there's some talk about that. I think Ryan Dorsey and other people, but now here's a question. If Brandon Scott, if it doesn't take effect until 2024 and the voters decided to re-elect, could he serve 3 terms? And I guess the answer is yes, because if it doesn't take effect until 2024. Now that may not happen. The voters may just say, nope, we don't like what he's doing. We want somebody else, but that's up to the voters. But I think if it doesn't start till 2024, then theoretically he could serve 2 terms. But then that kind of transitions into the other issue that you're probably going to ask me about, the city council vote to allow council people to collect a pension after serving just 8 years.
I want that job. I can do 8 years and then you get paid.
Right.
That sounds like a sweetheart deal to me.
Well, didn't the ethics board?
It also seems selfish. It seems like, so the reason that I'm becoming a politician is not to serve, but to become financially set.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me play the role of journalist. It is a conflict of interest, because the people that voted on it are the ones that benefit from it. Usually when you vote on something in Baltimore City, it's designed to impact the majority of the people that live in Baltimore City. Now you have 15 people. Is that what it is on the city council? You got 14 districts,
14, yeah.
the council president. So you have 15 people voting on something that only impacts 15 people themselves. So the ethics board is saying, oh, well, hold on, Mayor, this seems to be a conflict of interest. Okay, but on the other hand, and Nick Mosby brought this point up, if you can only serve 8 years, 2 terms, and as a council person, you're a city employee, and so you have, I guess, a certain amount deducted that will go toward your pension, then is that fair? Now, in the General Assembly, I looked it up, and I think you only have to serve 8 years, and you are eligible for a pension maybe starting at age 60, I think. And this is just for members of the General Assembly. So the city council rule would be very similar. So I guess there's a point to be made, but couldn't there be a law enacted that says, okay, if we can't get a pension unless we what is it now? 12 years, I think you have to serve 12 years before you get a pension in the city council. I believe it is. That's why they're changing it. They're lowering the number of years. So why not pass an exception to the pension law and says, okay, city council people, you won't have any money taken out or something.
Well, 12 years.
Okay, right. So it's 12. So you'd have to serve 3 terms. Now, because of question K, starting in 2024, you can't serve 3 terms. And so I guess Nick Mosby's argument is, okay, so if we can't serve 3 terms, we deserve a pension after 8 years, assuming that we serve the 2 terms. So,
you know what I want to hear? I want to hear somebody tell me that children will be able to go to class when it gets warm without being sent home. Mm-hmm. And children will be able to go to school in the winter without icicles on the windows. I mean, since we've last had you on the show, this sports gambling has gone through the roof.
Yeah.
I've counted up until they took the entry off of Wikipedia, $15 billion has come through the Maryland State Lottery, always touting education, but yet we got a new football stadium, new baseball stadium, but we got classrooms that aren't habitable in the summer or the colder months. And we have failed. I think we have failed the young people of Maryland. Utterly.
Well, and I just talked to interviewed the state lottery director, John Martin, the other day about all of this. Now, this is interesting with a new administration coming in. His job, he serves at the pleasure of the governor. So will he continue to serve as the director of the lottery and gaming? Who knows? Could be a political decision. Although the state lottery, to me, has never been like a political type of appointee. You want somebody in there that has experience in running lotteries and gaming, but that's kind of a side issue.
But this money that they get is managed by the Maryland Stadium Authority.
You mean the sports gambling revenue?
No, the lottery proceeds.
Oh, the lottery proceeds?
Yes. The Maryland Stadium Authority manages the lottery proceeds.
Okay. All right.
We have a new football stadium, a new baseball stadium, but in terms of public education, we have failed the young people of Maryland. Baltimore County. I understand Baltimore City's need, but Baltimore County hasn't conformed either. They have schools that they have to close. Or buses. I don't understand how we can do all of these other things and not take care of public education. I don't get that part.
The argument many years ago, actually 10 years ago, when voters approved the referendum question 7 or whatever it was, to expand gambling to table games and to authorize that new casino down at National Harbor, which is now MGM. They didn't know what it would be. I mean, I was down there election night, and oh boy, they were shooting off fireworks at National Harbor because the big casinos bankrolling the question 7 won. So back then, we were being told that all of that revenue was going to go to the education trust fund, all of the gambling revenue. Now, it might be true on the surface, but, and again, I'm not an expert at the fiscal matters, but the argument against it was this allows a governor, whoever it is, whether it's Martin O'Malley or Larry Hogan, to say, well, if we've got all this money from going from gambling to the trust fund, we can technically scale back the general fund money to a certain degree, but make sure it's the minimum amount that is required by state law to go to K through 12. And again, I'm kind of speaking out of line here because I can't verify all of that. That was an argument that some people said, well, how do we know that the amount of K through 12 education is going to substantially continue to increase with all the gambling revenue? Because isn't it going to be a shell game? That was the argument that people had for Senate President Mike Miller. And he's, oh, no, that's not going to happen. So, maybe somebody from the Baltimore Banner or Baltimore Sun could better answer that question. Did that allow governors to maybe scale back on the amount that would have been set aside in the regular operating budget to go to K through 12 education, knowing that we have this other pot of money from gambling revenue coming in? Now, the lottery director tells me that maybe a year from now, because again, they just started the mobile sports betting last Wednesday, so it's not even it's barely a week old, and not all of the companies are up and operating yet. There's like 7, and there will eventually be 21 or something like that. So at maybe a year from now, they will bring in maybe between 20, 25, or $30 million. And I'm told that all of that will go to the blueprint for Maryland's future, the Kerwin Education Fund.
I don't believe them, John. We don't have a track record of coming through. Mm-hmm. I'm very concerned. Again, everybody wants to be a politician, a delegate, a state senator, but I'm looking around my community and I'm not seeing schools open. Yeah, I'm seeing educational deserts in addition to transportation and food deserts. But again, everybody wants to be a politician. I mean, already on this show, they're talking about the mayor's race of 2024. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's why, and I can tell you, I can guarantee you that this director of lottery and gaming, John Martin, will be called to appear before some of the committees in Annapolis to update them on all of this. But again, I'm not defending him, but he's a facilitator. In other words, he's got a job to do. He didn't vote to approve gambling. It's like, okay, we want sports gambling. Here it is. Now you have to regulate it. So they're the chief regulator. So the Baltimore Banner, Baltimore Sun, the reporters need to, really keep on top of that story to make sure all of that revenue goes exactly where they say it will go to, the blueprint for public education. And, a couple of years ago, when we were covering the final vote on the Kerwin plan, the critics were saying, we can't afford, this is going to be all this much in taxpayer money, with no guarantee, that kind of thing. And their argument or their response was, well, it's not going to be all taxpayer money. A lot of it isn't. It's going to be the gambling revenue, that kind of thing. As you mentioned years ago, how we funded the construction of Camden Yards and what's now M&T Bank Stadium. But yes, it's very disconcerting when you see the condition of public schools in Baltimore City, and even in Baltimore County. They're not all air conditioned. Kevin Kamenetz accelerated that whole plan, and Johnny O is following up on that. So I think they're making more progress in schools in Baltimore City, but they were, they're older schools in Baltimore County, but not as old as Baltimore City.
We do what we want to do, John. People, human beings, we do what we want to do. I just hope somebody wants to do something for these young people. I mean, Fox makes it clear every day that we are not effectively engaging these young people. I personally think that, I mean, you know this, by age 8, educators know if a young person is going to college or to prison. They know this by age 8. You knew in the 3rd grade, that guy's going to jail.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy, this girl, they're going to college. You know that by age 8. What do we need in terms of public education? Who do you see running education? Do they keep the same people in place? I mean, I look at Baltimore and Prince George's, the worst school jurisdictions in the state. Both are majority black.
Are you talking about the local school boards, like Baltimore City School Board, Prince George's County School Board, or the state Department of Education?
County and Baltimore City in particular. Because, you know, now we got Ashley Esposito and Kwame Kenyatta Bay on the school board. They won resoundingly in that school board race. Ashley Esposito is pretty good with numbers and organizing. Kwame Kenyatta Bay, advocate, educator. I just expect to see something new, but we're running out of time. Anything we didn't cover you wanted to comment on? Still got about 3 minutes left.
You covered quite a bit, and there's no easy solution to education. Elected school board members, that's a good thing. I mean, that is a good thing. It's not going to change everything overnight, but will be interesting to see how that runoff election in Georgia plays out. I mean, I believe that Warnock is going to keep his seat. It's going to be a slim margin, I think, but I hope it doesn't go to recounts and allegations.
He's raised a lot more money. Warnock's raised maybe 30 million more. Herschel's numbers, people are not giving as much money. I think they're starting to see, hey, if I've got $1, do I put it over here or do I put it over here? And then honestly, Herschel Walker is not the most articulate candidate. I mean, when he starts talking about werewolves and vampires, there's need for concern.
Well, there's a lot of people that think he has a traumatic brain injury, and I'm not joking.
Yes.
No, I'm not joking at all.
Yes.
The number of concussions that a player can get in his career, college and pros, we kind of, didn't make a big deal of it back then. But you have to wonder.
And he was a big, strong player. When he hit people, you felt it through the television.
Sure. No, he was a great player, but how many times did he get hit, suffer concussions, and I don't know. It's just
can the man complete a sentence? Can he say a complete sentence that makes sense?
Well, it makes it makes you wonder about his mental competency, but more than that, just why he's there because Trump anointed him. He's the guy that Trump backed, and that's a sad commentary, I think, in 2022.
Will Donald Trump go to prison?
I doubt it, but he's not out of the woods. And real quick, I know we got to go.
Take your time.
I think Ivanka Trump may be the smartest in the family. Have we heard her be interviewed on Fox News or NBC?
No.
On any podcast, in-depth interview with the New York Times? No. I don't know the woman, but I suspect her lawyers told her, don't say anything. You're under investigation in New York State with the family business.
So shut up.
Just say nothing. That's the smartest thing to do when you're under investigation. And she wasn't there when Trump announced that he was running for re-election. Her husband was, Jared Kushner. She wasn't there and said, "Oh, I love my father, I support him, but I need to move on with my family." Smart move.
Good deal. John Rydell, as always, it's a pleasure. We appreciate you. And thank you for checking on us and sharing your expertise. I can't wait to talk more about this upcoming citywide election. Have a good day, world. Good morning.
You too.
Yes, sir.